Hey there, grab a cup of coffee and join us in an entertaining and thoughtful conversation about parenting. We're tasting new coffee every episode and diving into a deep conversation about the inevitable speed bumps and seasons we'll encounter as we strive to be the most successful parents and spouses we can be. Welcome to Family Brew Podcast.
All right, what are we drinking, Jim?
Today we're trying Door County Coffee and Tea Company Whole Bean Peanut Butter Crunch.
Initial impressions?
The smell was a lot stronger.
Are you getting
the taste?
Are you getting the peanut butter?
I get like a little hint of peanut butter at the end.
Does it come in late? Comes on late?
Yeah. I initially tried this with just half and half. And I'm thinking I'm going to need a little bit of sugar now.
I am
Yeah, me
using extra from Dunkin' Donuts, which is just cream and sugar.
It doesn't taste bad though. It is smooth, but I definitely am not getting the peanut butter I was expecting.
And you kind of want that, right? When you hear peanut butter, you kind of want.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Like I've never said, I wish I had a hint of peanut butter flavor.
Right. That's not one of those things that you want a little bit of.
All right.
I'm not hating it though. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah, because I heard this one person say such and such, and it's totally how I want to live my life and raise my kids. It doesn't mean that that's what I'm doing
Right.
Yeah.
all the
I
time.
want
Like
to live
the
that,
intention, the idea
Right.
is there, but sometimes my actions don't match that intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't be perfect. Like, as long as you're heading toward the goal, right? You're gonna trip and fall sometimes, but oh well. As long as you're continuing on that path, get up, brush the dirt off, keep going.
When I think about parenting, it's just being intentional. Even if that means only 5 minutes of my day, maybe I was super intentional, but those 5 minutes could really mean a lot. You know what I mean? But it's the days where I'm just in survival mode or just reacting to my kids that, you know.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that? Like, how do you balance? I mean, at some level, you got to go out and earn and provide for your family, right? And you're going to be gone to be able to do that. So how do you balance what that looks like versus, you know, it's also important to be there and be home for your kids and stuff. Like, how do we balance that?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
Well,
how do you have responsibilities you have to take care of and everything like that, and then sometimes you have to prioritize your responsibilities. I wouldn't say sometimes, say all the time, but life makes that difficult. You know, one priority is to obviously earn a financial, you know, your children's financial well-being and your family's financial well-being, and then the other side of that is making sure that you're there to teach them, you know, what they need to learn. So, finding that balance seems impossible at times.
So if we're out there earning, how much is enough?
Are you looking at me because I do the finances or?
Yeah.
I mean, is that an issue? Like, is what we have in our head, like this amount is enough? Is that too high? And we're striving for something that's more than what we need, or
I don't think I ever had a number or like
Yeah.
a standard of what I need to make. It just never went that way for us. It's like, oh man, we make this much. Let's go buy this, and then inevitably we're like, oh crap, now I got to make more money. You know, like, but it's never like I need to make $200,000 a year to be successful. That's just never been us.
I feel like in our time with having kids, we've kind of been all over the place on that. Like, there's been times where we were like, we really had to cut back and just like really be careful about what we were spending and budgeting and stuff like that. And then there's been times where it's been like, we could be a lot more flexible. And I don't think our kids really noticed the difference all that much. Because I think we've tried to, even when we had extra, to not make that like super obvious and be like, okay, now you guys can have whatever you want. Like, we try to keep things reasonable, whether we can afford it or not. Try not to like, and the temptation has always been there, I think, for us, because because we adopted our kids and we came about being parents so late in life, and
we had to catch up.
We felt like so excited to have them that anytime they were like, I want this, I want that, we wanted to give it to them right away. Like, and so at first I think we kind of had to like remind ourselves to tone it down a bit, because it got to this expectation.
We need a bigger house, or we got to stop buying stuff.
Yeah. Right? It was like, this thing got broken. Oh, mom and dad will just buy another one. Like, it became an expectation. It started to reflect in their attitude. And so we were kind of like, okay, we better tone that down, because, just we can't let our excitement color the way that they see, like, just go to the ATM, get more money, Mom. Like, it doesn't work that way for everything. So, yeah, just making sure that we kind of teach them that, what is actually important.
Jim and I have talked about that too, where we're like, we see these spoiled moments come out of our children and we're like, where did that come from? And then we realize it's like, it's kind of by default sometimes too, just because they literally have never been without. They don't know what it is to have to eat ramen tonight because there's nothing else in the fridge, or to go without heat because we can't afford it. Maybe something broke, but we can usually find the funds to fix it. And so they don't know what it is to get stuck on the side of the road because we ran out of gas because we didn't have money to fill the tank. They just don't know those things. They just know mom and daddy swipe their card or pay money, and we have new batteries, we have new this, we have, And so, yeah, those statements come out of their mouth too. And they're just like, well, can't you just buy another one, or can't you just fix it? And you don't want to be mad, but you're kind of like, do you know what? This takes money, that takes work, that takes time, right?
Yeah,
they don't.
It's like a double-edged sword too when they say those things. It's almost like, okay, first of all, now my kid's spoiled, and second of all, I failed as a parent.
Right, because you guys are where you're at, right? Because you've struggled, right? And so that kind of builds strength sometimes, I think, to struggle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you don't let them struggle, right, you don't end up with some of that resolve, I think, that you need.
But there's been times that I've been like, I feel like having them eat ramen for a week just to know what that feels like, but they'd probably love it, so it would be a treat, not a lesson. Yeah,
we did that. So at the beginning of COVID, we put together an emergency food kit, like I think everybody did. Some people already had it. Some people bought trailers of stuff, went crazy, prepped it out. But I remember we opened it a year and a half later, and we're like, let's eat whatever's going to expire, and this is what we'd have to do in emergency. And they're like, yes, we get to eat that stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's what I was hoping for. I was hoping they wouldn't react that way, but they did.
Yeah, our daughter was like, can we have cup of noodles?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I had some awesome ramen meals growing up. My mom was really creative with ramen, but
So have you guys ever had to make decisions based on like maybe earning more or making more or getting promoted or moving up, where you had to decide whether or not that was best for the family?
Well, I think we kind of decided, like, as we were becoming parents, we intended to both work, and I had just planned out that I was going to work and what I was going to be doing, and then it just kind of all changed within 2 weeks of us getting our kids into our house. They ended up in the hospital with RSV because they had been exposed at my work to other kids and came down with RSV. And so that was devastating for me. I felt like I had failed already, and I'd only had them for 2 weeks, and I thought they're already like going to the hospital, like something's wrong with what I did. So our whole plan changed at that point, and it became more important to be home with them and keep them healthy, and then to earn 2 paychecks. So at that point, we just reconfigured everything, and Mark went to work and I stayed home, and we just worked it out.
And obviously, looking back, it's not like we hid them in a closet so they couldn't get germs anymore, right?
Right. Yes. I knew they needed to be exposed to germs at some point, but I felt like one of our kids had to stay in the hospital for a few days, and I thought, that I just remember being totally just devastated by that, because I was like, I felt like they were going to come take them back from us because we'd done the wrong thing. We'd failed already. And like, yeah, it wasn't as big deal as I thought it was, but it felt like it at the time. And so,
I remember not to cut you off, but I remember calling the social worker and just having to let them know. I mean, you had to kind of disclose everything medically. And I remember calling the social worker and letting them know that our daughter was in the hospital. And I felt like, oh man, I'm in trouble, And she actually looked at it the other way. She was like, that's so cool that these two kids that didn't really have anybody to, advocate and raise them, like one of them is spending the night in the hospital with her tonight. And she was like looking at it backwards, like, wow, that's so cool that she has somebody for now that, that she's in this medical situation. She's got somebody for her. So.
Yeah, she was pretty good at reassuring. There was a couple incidents like that. Like before we were officially had signed all the adoption papers and stuff like that, I was like, oh no, we have to tell them, but they are going to come and get our kids and take them away. Like, just like when our son bumped his head, he got like this giant goose egg. We weren't even with them. He was in church and he bonked his head. He ended up with this big old huge bump. And I was like, oh no, like they're going to come get him. They're going to take him away. They're going to think we did something wrong. And I was like, it was just, that was a rough time getting used to all that, like new parenting stuff, and then feeling like somebody is watching over you, gonna like snatch it away, So.
And then since then, right, we've kind of been in that kind of family where I work and you stay home. Mm-hmm. And I'm in retail. You guys kind of know that, but I did have a chance. We live in a kind of a remote area where like the next major metropolis is like an hour away, and it could be traffic a lot of days, and weather could affect that for sure. And so there was an opening to be able to get a promotion at my work, and I went and interviewed for it anyways, knowing that I'd probably turn down the position because it was just too far from home, and we don't want to really sacrifice that amount of time. Me being outside the house, but I do remember distinctly in the interview, they interviewed me. There was two people that interviewed me, and they told me that it went well and stuff, and they offered me a position, and I respectfully declined and just said, if this was closer to where I live, I'll take it, but this is really far, and it's not really something I'm willing to give up at the moment. And they just kind of looked at me like dumbfounded, like, why would you turn down extra money? And so they offered an amount, and I just friendly, really politely said no thank you. And then they said, well, what would it take? What amount would it take for you to come down here? And I just remember I was kind of put on the spot. I didn't expect that question. And I just remember like I just had to think on the fly. And I just explained to them. I just remember like I had to think on the fly, and I had to explain to them. They just kind of looked at me weird, like, what do you mean? Yeah, you're going to be out of the house more than you would, and you may be away from your family a little bit more, but you're going to have X number of dollars more, and that should work out better for you. And I remember telling him, like, I just have to make a choice here. And I was still on the fence. I'd love to say I like was super stoic and I was like, my family comes first, but that's not how it worked. And I just remember like thinking like, well, it's kind of like this. Like I could either be around and we could feed my kids SpaghettiOs because we wouldn't have much, right? Or I could have somebody else feed them steak, right? Because we'd be bringing in more and we'd be able to afford that, but I wouldn't be around and watch them eat it. And they kind of both looked at me like I was crazy, the people that interviewed me, and that's kind of how we ended it. And I don't want that to come across like, man, I had the right words at the right time and like I'm an awesome dad or something, because I don't even live up to those words a lot of the time. But I just remember thinking like, okay, from here on out, I want to arrange my life in a way where if there's opportunities that come up where it might be more lucrative or it might be a path in life that gives us more stuff, if that's going to be a trade-off that I won't be able to be around as much or Jamie won't be able to be around as much, like we're not going to make that deal.
And from my perspective, I was kind of not even about the financial, but the just the extra stress of having to do the extra traveling and being extra tired because of that and stuff like that. And I just felt like that's not worth it. Some more money and then you're more tired, less quality time when you're at home because you're overtired and by the time you go through all the traffic and everything else, you're going to be in not a mood to be, with your kids and stuff and have that patience with them and stuff like that. So not that you're not good at that, because you are, but just like, I just didn't think it was worth it, like to sell your happiness for a couple more dollars. Like,
Well, it was way more than a couple.
well,
I'm just kidding.
You know
I'm
what
just
I
kidding.
mean? Like,
I just wanted to see if you'd be like, you should have taken it, crazy. I'm just kidding.
I'd rather have you in, happier and be able to enjoy your time home more.
Yeah,
and
I just have some deep-seated memories as a kid of, like, obviously my dad wasn't around, so my mom's a single mom, and she had to work all the time because she had 4 kids, and she, so we spent a lot of time at my grandma's, and I realize now what my mom was up to, right? She was providing for the family. But as a kid, I didn't see it that way. I just felt like, well, neither one of my parents want me around, right? And I just felt like, I remember thinking then, like, I would never do that to my kids, because what they see and what their little brains are able to comprehend when they're kids, like, they don't care where I'm at. They just know Dad's not here, and he must not want to be here, because he would be if he wanted to be. And so I just remember, like, feeling that as a kid and thinking, I'll never do that as an adult. But it's hard when you got to provide for your family, right? The opportunities come up, and it's not to say that you can't focus on, like, being a dad that's around or being a mom that's around, and also, like, advancing in your career. But I do think there are some certain crossroads where you're like, I got to make a choice here, and what's my focus? Because I don't think you could have 2 major focuses, right?
Right.
So I think in almost every subject that we've come up with parenting, communication always comes back to me. And I think that it's okay to communicate with your kids a very, surface level version of your finances and things, and explain, we explain when Daddy's been working a lot of extra shifts, or if they're asking for something that's really expensive, you understand that would mean Daddy would have to work another day, right? Or things like that. That's okay, I think, to communicate with them and stuff, because I want them to see the correlation.
Right.
Because for me growing up, it didn't matter if both my parents were working or my dad was working a better job or a less job. My parents were never good with money. So my parents could have both been working and gone all the time, and then we were still eating ramen, or I was still getting my thrift store clothes that I was so excited to have 2 new outfits for the whole year for, things like that, which I did appreciate as a kid, but it confused me, because one minute you're, buying this new vehicle and you're gone working all the time, and then the next minute you're gone working all the time, but all of a sudden we don't have a car, and it's just, it was confused. So there was no communication. It was not my business, as their kid and stuff. So I think for us, we're both trying to be more financially responsible than that, and also communicate with our kids as age appropriately, how it works, how the income and the outgoing works. And, they watch me do the budget. They don't really understand everything on it, but they watch me, just things like that. So I think communication's a big deal. So they can grasp kind of the whole idea of what it all means. I don't think I've ever seen our kids resent you for your longer shifts or anything, so.
No, they definitely hate it.
They hate it, but they don't blame you.
Yeah, it's not like I'm doing it by choice. Yeah. I get forced into overtime, so I have to work it. And as far as that crossroads goes, we're talking about career or family, I'm kind of there right now, right? My crossroads means leaving my job altogether.
Like the entire field?
Yeah, for the sake of my family, because in being in the industry, I'm a first responder, so overtime and everything is just, it's nonstop, because, as the population grows and pandemics and everything else that happens, it's just, you're expected to be there. And unfortunately, the department that I work for, that the thought is that your primary responsibility is to the department and the area that we serve, and maybe less your family, regardless of whatever it takes to keep the wheels rolling. And that's very frustrating. Like, I don't want to be at work more than I signed up to be. I knew that there was going to be overtime available, but it's taken me away so much. And I've had to struggle with certain aspects of being in this field for so long that I'm coming to terms with now and what that looks like. But to walk away after putting so much time and so much effort and getting to a financial level that I never dreamed that we would be at, it to walk away from that is a very tough decision, and to, because the kids are comfortable. I know my family's good, and when I am home, it's quality time. So there's a lot of perks, but that draws that question about quality time versus quantity time. And there's an argument to be made that quality time is great, but there has to be quantity. You have to be there in their life in general. Like you can be present for 1 day out of the month or 2 days out of the month, but that's all the kids are going to remember.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And it flies by.
Yeah.
I mean, and you've told me before, right? Like you return from a shift and you feel like they're different kids, right?
Yeah. You feel like I'll work for 8 days, 9 days straight, and then come home and it feels like my kids have grown a year, And it's not like we're separated for the entire time. I can talk to them all the time on the phone and all those things, but it's not the same.
It's not. Yeah.
It's not the same as going out and teaching your kids things about life and showing them things and having experiences together.
That's a big deal because obviously there's just things I can't do as mom only,
And then not to mention the level of stress that puts on you to take care of 3 children by yourself for a week straight and then come home. I get to come home bitter and upset and tired for a day and then go back to work for 3 more days. And then you're stuck at work. It's frustrating. So it's frustrating for me to see you go through that. And then I'm sure it's frustrating on your end too.
Yeah, for sure. Like you say, decompress. You probably need more decompression time than I do because I'm just gone, an 8-hour shift. But I still have that, like, I want to come home and just kind of like, I don't know if decompress is the right word, but just kind of like recoup, right, from the day.
Yeah.
And then I start thinking like, oh, wait a minute. Doesn't Jamie need to recoup from the day alone with the kids and the schooling and the cooking dinner and stuff? Like, I don't know if that's like
That's a conversation we have too, but it goes a little deeper too because of the first responder life. Like there's a whole nother level of decompression that needs to happen chemically. And that makes it, sometimes it's easier to say, yeah, you go take your day. You're fine. I got it covered. And other times, no, the baby had me up all night. You need to change the next diaper. You need to, and that's sometimes we're good at figuring that out. And sometimes we're clashing over who needs the decompression more. So that's, yeah.
So there's a verse in Hebrews. It's 13:5 says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And I feel like that verse is appropriate because maybe not so much the love of money. I don't think that everybody out there is chasing money. I know there are people that are. But maybe the part about just being content with what you have, I think is a struggle for all of us. Like I feel like the content people are content with almost nothing. And then like discontented people wouldn't be content with everything, right? Like it's not something that changes the more you have, like the changes whether you're content or not.
I don't want to get the name wrong. I think it was Paul who had the prayer that was, please don't leave me in need so that I am upset with you, and please don't give me too much that I forget you, something like that. And I have always loved that little prayer because it's true. It's like help my heart have just the right amount to where, I'm not mad at you that I don't have enough, quote unquote, and I don't have so much that I don't think I need you, Lord, And that's a place that I'll pray sometimes, and sometimes I'm a little afraid to pray that because I don't think my numbers line up with God's numbers.
For sure. Like if God was going to teach you, right, teach you a lesson on like, you think you need this. Like I'm raising my hand, but we're on audio only. But you think you need this high level of, that's what you need, right? And he's going to show you that there's much less is actually what you need. Like, how is he going to teach you that? I mean, it's not going to be in time of, prosperity, right? The only way to teach you would be for you to feel like you don't have enough, and he shows you that you do, right?
I think it's technically we're supposed to be content with food, clothes, and shelter, I think is what it is, right? And I look at my list on the bills of the month, and I'm like, that's a lot more than just food, clothes, and shelter.
You're like, hotel is shelter when we're on the road.
There's enjoyment in there.
Oh.
Yeah, there's another quote. C.S. Lewis said this, and I wrote it down so I won't mess it up. But he said, if you aim at heaven, you'll get earth thrown in. Aim at earth, and you'll get neither. And I feel like if you were to try to
I just read that.
Think of that same quote in terms of what we're talking about. If you aim at career, your family will get left behind. But I think if you aim at family, you can still maybe get the fulfillment of what you're looking for in a career, like through being around and being there for your family too.
I think something we've noticed in our life is we'll have a desire for something. It could be to move to a new house. It could be a job thing. It could be something. And it's like it was the right desire, but not the right time or method. And God will have it. It'll come into our life, but usually a completely different way than we tried to make happen, or all the efforts that we put into it. God was like, nope, I've got my plan for you. And then it comes and we look back like, oh, that was much better than if we would have gotten it right when we wanted it, and that's where contentment comes in. I think for me, though, I just struggle with staying in that place of contentment. It doesn't always, working on that one.
So Daniel Tosh, I wouldn't say let's align our podcast with Daniel Tosh, but he said a line that I always thought was funny. He said, money doesn't buy happiness, but I've never seen anyone frown on a wave runner, right? And so you think about something like that, you think like, well, I'd like to try it out for a second and just see how it is. But if you're listening to this podcast, I urge you to like spend some time, just Google, you can YouTube it, you'll find it real quick, on whether or not people that have a ton of money or people that are celebrities are happy. Like there's a ton of books written about it. There's a ton of articles. There's a ton of videos about people that are like, the more you have, the more famous you are, the more alone you are.
I just finished reading this little mini book about, how you can be godly in your, stewardship of your finances. And it was bringing up exactly that. It gave a couple stories of people that won the lottery and then they died like that week because of something, or they stressed themselves out so much to a stroke, or just all these things. And it was like, you didn't really accomplish much.
Or even the interviews for the head CEOs of these giant corporations that say they're the most miserable people on the planet.
Right.
Because the more money you have, the more stress you have.
Mm-hmm. And even to get to that point, they were working 16-hour days and putting off everything else just to get to that point. But and it almost seems like I feel like if I was listening into this, I'd almost feel like, well, that of course that's what something that people don't have much are going to say, right? It's better to have a little, right? It's almost like if you were like finishing fourth in the Olympics or something, you're like, I don't want that heavy medal. It probably hurt my neck, right? Like it seems like that's what people would say if you don't have a lot. You'd kind of come up with a way to make it look like that's a better off scenario anyway. But I feel like there's something to it, to feel like, you're just looking at meeting your needs and not trying to have extra.
Yeah. I think, that lottery thing, like you were talking about, I've heard not about like people dying or something like that, but just like that it ruins their lives because suddenly they question all their relationships. Like, why are they my friend? Is it because I have money, or is it because they're my friend? Like, how do you judge like how genuine people are around you and stuff like that when you have something that they want? Like, and so I think that tends to make people miserable too. Like money, just it can really draw out the worst in people, I think, a lot of times. So
and it's not just a number in a bank account, right? Like it's stuff. Like we strive to like collect stuff in our culture, and like we made an effort like I don't know, a few years ago, where we want to try to give our kids memories and not stuff. And I remember when we first moved up here, we got in a small group at church, and there was a couple in there with us, and I remember them sharing that they had made a rule that the grandparents could only buy one Christmas present. And I remember thinking like, what? You're crazy. You're depriving your kids. And now, first of all, how do you get grandparents to like abide by that rule, right? But like a few years in, when like our like closet's overflowing with stuff and our playroom is, getting filled with stuff, I started going, dang, they knew what they were talking about. Like that made a whole bunch of sense, right? And so I remember even having a conversation about where we're like, what if we just gave our kids memories? Like, that's not going to age. It's not going to grow old. It's not going to go away. No one could take it away. And let's just try to like give them, memories of us doing fun stuff as a family instead of things to collect.
Yeah. The stuff we give away to like Goodwill or whatever, it's like been played with twice. You look at it and you go, how many hours of work is this? Like, how much did we spend on all these toys, games, whatever that they barely touched and got bored with after 5 minutes? Like, what was the point of all that? Like, it seems silly when you look back at it and go like, well, I mean, I just gave away a pair of shoes to somebody's daughter that I think my daughter wore maybe twice. And she complained both times that she wore them. So it was like, why are we putting so much effort into like what we're buying for them when it's, definitely underappreciated and underused and not really needed? Like, and about the experiences thing, that's definitely important. And the whole experience thing, like, does it have to be Disneyland or Disney World? No, like, the experience can be going hiking. Like it can be completely free. Like it doesn't have to be experiences that involve money. Like, I mean, I think back as a kid, my parents were decently well off because they both worked, both, had really good jobs and stuff. So we did things like go on cruises and go to Hawaii and stuff like that. But like, I mean, for a kid who's 5, the part I remember about Hawaii was that I had a Barbie doll that I brought with me. One Barbie. And I played with the Barbie on the beach and we went snorkeling and saw some fish. Like, did we have to do that in Hawaii? Of course not. We could have done that in Catalina, or we could have done that in, probably almost anywhere. And it would have been the exact same experience, and we wouldn't have had to pay nearly as much money. So, I mean...
You know what the one thing I remember about Hawaii is? Oh, wait, I grew up in a poor family. We never got to go to Hawaii.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, what...
Oh, yeah.
What experience, like, does it matter, like, where you have those experiences? Like, we could build a sandcastle with our kids, at the nearest beach to our home, or we could fly to Hawaii and build a sandcastle with our kids. Are they going to care which beach it's on? No.
And they hit us with that. Like, the other day, my daughter was like, remember that one time we collected rocks in the backyard? And I was like, no. But I do remember these expensive trips we've taken you on, right?
Is that a girl thing? Because my daughter, the same thing. She'll be like, oh, that looks like the person that we saw at that one pizza place with the green wall that, had that clock with the Roman numerals. And I'm like, what? But just this morning, I actually had them do a little journal entry of describe your favorite vacation or something like that, best vacation. And she couldn't think for a minute. And then she was like, I know. And it was McGee Creek because she got to listen to the stream. And I was like... that's what I'm going for. That's what I want to maintain. And I love that they're at an age where they can remember now. Because my toddler, whatever. But
right, so exactly, you could shell out thousands of dollars to take your kids to Disney World. Like the first time we took our kids to Disneyland, we were in the parking structure and we got on the elevator and we rode down the elevator and our daughter went, wee! On the way down. I was like, we haven't even gone in the park yet. She has no idea what she's in for.
That's a $40 elevator right away.
Yeah. By the way. It's like...
It's $40 to park at Disneyland.
The experience, it was so simple, but it was so fun for her. Like, it didn't matter because, put it in perspective of a child, like... We could have saved a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Wasn't that
the
fun?
box? My toddler, give him a darn box. He has a whole tub of toys, but he doesn't want that. He wants the doggy food dish, or he wants the box. Like,
yeah, that's common for kids, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we never actually just wrapped a box for anybody. I kept threatening to, but we haven't done it yet.
I remember, and I've actually gone back to try to find this book, and it's going to take me a minute because there's a whole bunch of books written on this, and I would actually have to read through them because I don't remember the author, I don't remember the title, but it was a book written by a hospice nurse. I think I've told you guys about this before, but there was a chapter in there where this nurse, I don't even remember if it was a male or female nurse, but they talked about they came. Their previous job was like a nurse at a convalescent home, and then they got into the hospice field, and I don't know if you guys have had any experience with hospice nurses, but they're amazing. We went through a cancer battle with my grandpa, and the nurse we had was amazing. But this chapter in the book talked about just having conversations with people that are a day or two away from dying, and the things that they would talk about. And what was really cool, and it struck me, and I still remember it, even though I don't remember the other chapters of the book, is that people would bring up relationships and people, and they wouldn't talk about their stuff that they collected. And some of these people had hobbies and things that they spent lifetimes accumulating, and they would talk about that. But when it got a day or two before they left this planet, it would always come back around to an estranged relationship with a child, or they would bring up a grandkid, or they'd bring up a spouse that they had been married to forever. And I just thought, like, how that impacted me, that's really when it boils all down to, like, this stuff just like fades away. And you could talk all day about, well, you can't take it with you, right? But really, like, what's most important to people when it really comes down to it is relationships.
Yeah, that was a stark realization for me. It was for work. Once again, I was going through some training, and they put us up in this hotel, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go swim in the pool. I'm by myself here. I'm just going to go for a swim and relax. And I was the only person there. And I'm sitting there in this amazing pool on top of this hotel that my job paid for and all this stuff. And I was lonely, like I missed my family. Like, there's no point in experiencing these amazing things if you're not experiencing them with the people you love. At least that's what I took away from that. It for me personally, and some people might like that and being alone and I got to experience it and I'll always have that memory and all that. But I mean, if it's by yourself, you're not sharing that with anybody, then where are you going to go? Where's it going to go? It's going to die with you, and that's it. Versus the shared emotions or experience or the peace or things that you can connect with people on. Those are what's important, right?
I think when you find the right person or people, you want them and you're happy with them, and those are who you desire, but you're never going to really get that one thing that you'll be completely satisfied with, and you'll never have to go buy something else. You know what I mean? You're always going to want the next upgrade or, the next, oh, hey, they're coming out with this. I never saw that before. I need that. And usually it's the people who, struggled in their relationships and have to fill those gaps, that the stuff is what's easier to get to,
right,
and they don't hurt you. So.
And like, of all the things you can give your kids, like I wrote this in my notes, I think time is the most expensive thing that there is. Like that's what you want to give them more of, but it costs a lot, right? Like Jamie always laughs at me because I overplan everything, and I plan every minute of every vacation we're going to go on, and I try to squeeze everything in there that we can, and we end up only being able to do half of it, and I don't learn my lesson because the next vacation I plan even more than that probably, and we end up bringing half the stuff home we plan on doing. But like the only way to add time in the day is to stop doing stuff you're already doing, and you have to like take stock of like, well, what is it that I'm going to stop doing so I have more time to spend focus on my family.
We went to a seminar once, and a therapist was doing a lesson on the family unit and stuff, and she said that 20 minutes a day of individualized attention with your child can do wonders. Like, I can't remember exactly what the statistic was, like what the end goal was, but it was like 20 minutes a day is all they really need to feel, what was the word? I can't remember exactly what it was, but it just, in my experience, I notice when I do take those 20, 30 minutes and I'm just focusing on the one child with the thing that they want to do, which isn't always what I want to do, but it's the thing they want to do, it's their mood is so much better. Their behavior is so much better. It's just the household atmosphere is just so much better. So I've seen it work, but for some reason it's like you just said, it's, no, I've got the dishes and the laundry and this packing to do or whatever it is, it just eats up that time so quickly. And then, I forget to spend that quality time with them. Even though I'm a stay-at-home mom, I'm home with them, and I still struggle to find that time. So it's just about intention, I guess, and it's hard to set those other things aside.
And I always feel like it's like one step ahead of me, right? Where it's like, okay, once I finish this, I'm going to focus on the kids for an hour. And then something else pops up, and I'm like, okay, as soon as this is over, I'm going to focus. And it's always one step ahead, and I keep having this dream where I feel like I never get to take that step and just spend an hour with them because there's always something. And there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something if you let it. And so, you just got to remind yourself to, like, I've had days where I like sit on the floor and play with the kids and I can't barely get up anymore because I'm getting older and stuff. But, and then I have days where I go stretch without doing that kind of stuff. And it just like, I feel convicted and it hits me like, oh man, like I don't want to look up and see that, time's flown by. And I had always told myself I was going to do this or be this as a dad, and it just didn't happen because time flies by.
Yeah, I've definitely done that same thing where it's like, yeah, you're a stretch and you feel like this great dad, and you're just like, man, I nailed it. I've been nailing it. This is awesome. Yeah. And then there's a stretch where you're like, God, I just want to relax and be able to think like an adult, instead of play dolls with my daughter.
Yeah.
And then so much.
And it's okay to admit that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah, absolutely. But it feels like it's a hard balance. I don't know if it's a guilt thing, like I see my kids, I'm like, oh man, I should really be more intentional about my time with them. But then if I don't have the intentional time for myself, then, I start to lose sight of that, and then I get grumpy and yeah, so it's this balance that's very hard to maintain.
Yeah. And if there's a parent out there that's not willing to admit that there are stretches where they feel like, if I could just be single or even just childless for like an hour, right? Like, if you're not willing to admit that, you probably should jump on a podcast about lying because, like, we've all been there, right? And I think it's okay to admit that. Now, that's not saying you want to ditch all your responsibilities and your family and your kids, but, like, there's moments where you feel like you could use a little break, but
it's healthy to take a break.
We kind of had that, like, we've been talking a little bit, Mark and I, between us, about like when we were kids, we both grew up in families where it was like the kids were not the priority. They just kind of went along for the ride for whatever. You know what I mean? So,
and if you're our parents and you're listening, we still love you.
yeah.
And think about it. You raised parents that are
Thank you for listening to the Family Brew podcast. Where can they find us at?
Facebook,
both of our
Instagram, and
households, the
Twitter.
kids
And what should they do when they get
didn't
there?
make the
Follow
decisions.
us.
What else can they do when they get there, buddy?
You know,
They
whatever
can
mom and
suggest
dad
new
were
coffee
watching on TV,
flavors
that was what
and
was on
suggest
TV.
new
Wherever
ideas
mom and dad
for
wanted to go for dinner,
episodes and
that's
much
where we
more.
went. Like, it wasn't
Sounds good.
about that. And we had kind of felt like we had gotten to a place where our kids just assumed that they were going to get to choose, you know, on a regular basis where we went for dinner and what was on the TV and what was going to be happening and we both kind of went like, hey, wait a minute, that's not how we grew up. But then we realized, but that's not what we want to perpetuate either. Like,
No,
we don't want to.
Like, yeah, you want your kids
we
to know
wanna
that they're the
find-
center of our galaxy, right? Like, they're
But-
important to us. But when they get out into the world, they're not. I don't want them expecting that the world,
Right.
that they're the center of that
Yeah.
galaxy.
Finding that balance where, you know, their opinion matters, but it's not the only opinion in the family. There's 4 people here and everybody gets to be part of this family. Like, you know, so we've been working on trying to balance that out. Like, because we've noticed a few of those, like, well, but I want this. And last time he got to choose, so it's my turn. And, you know, so yeah, finding that balance where it's not like we are the authority, but we're not forcing our opinions and everything all the time.
Isn't that the name of parenting? Balance.
Balance, yeah.
It's just the word.
That's a challenge, definitely.